The first thing to understand about laying the woodstone product is that your mortar that you're laying with needs to be dry. If it's too wet, makes your work dirty, makes the block slump and will give you a hard time. This mortar here, you can see how it's quite dry, and it upset a lot of brickies or blockies saying, oh, it's too dry, but you actually want it like this, and you'll be much happier later on when it comes to cleaning it and keeping the work compressed and minimise any cracking. So let's just have a little look at that. When you spread it, you may not get as big a spread as you like because the mortar is so dry. I'll just get this first course down because it will help once you got a course in. It's always preferable when you're laying your block, the woodstone block, that this is the bottom, this is the top, okay? You can lay it the other way, but you'll get a better finish and a better grip if you use this as your bottom. Tapping him in. Sometimes it's a little tap into your perp joint and then a tap on the top. We also use a mallet on the top, and you can see, even from that side there, see how the mortar, it's not coming all over the block. And if I cut that with my trowel, it's really relatively quite clean. The other thing that's important is this motion here of tapping it down. And you can see now that that joint will be nice and compressed. And it's turned the mortar from being quite sort of grainy and dry to a good bond on the block. The other thing is to not stress about is if your mortar's falling off your block, because it's more important to keep your block clean than worrying about how well it's spreading. So that mortar joint there's been sitting while we went and had a meeting, so 10 minutes, and you can see it's given me a little bit of trouble like tapping it down, but it will still hold well together because we're compressing the joint. By belting that down, my mortar, even when it was a little bit dry, I can get a really good compression on the block. You can see it's nice and full there, it's not dirty, it's quite dry, it's quite a dry sort of a mix. Yep, nice and plumb. So now we'll have a look at the way to mortar the top. There's two ways we can do it. Some people might like to butter their block a bit like that, okay? So I'm just coming in and I'm getting one on the edge. So, like I was saying, if you get little bits like this, don't be stressing because you're thinking, oh, my mud's too dry, and be tempted to soften your mud up like brick mud, because it's better to spend a little bit of time and just fix up your spread. So you've got that. So that spread there would be similar to what you do on a Besser block that has holes and webs in the middle. And with what we've got in the middle is a nice little furrow or a pocket, which will help belt the block down. Just giving that a cut, or even in the overhand side. As I get that over, you might have what appears to be some type of bellying, a bit of a gap in the blocks here. Don't stress about that, because the natural little bellies in the block, take that out and you don't notice it. So you can see here, I've got a gap here, I've got a gap here, and my block's sitting on here. But my work's plumb. More important to understand that your work's going up plumb than stressing about the whole lot of the block. Okay, nice healthy amount of mud on the perp there. Bring him in and give him a nice little bit of a tap up. Okay, tapping him down and tapping him up. Once again on the overhand. If I'm laying that. If I have to pull a block out and I end up with this, don't load your block, your trowel up and then smear that in. Okay, it makes your work very dirty and it's much harder to clean. So don't stress about it to start with, just leave it and know that you'll come back to it. If you're going to fill it in carefully. Okay. So a little bit of finesse and fill that in. Preferably not to handle mud with your hands, but if you do have to, that's the go. We've been known just to wet the block a little bit, okay? Just the top of the block, wet it, especially after smoko and after lunch. You want to just wet the block, it wets up your perps on the course below, and when you lay the next course, it helps bond it in better and not get a cracking. Last time we did a spread and we spread each side, you can of course put your spread through the middle of your block and do a spread like a brick. Okay, so that's fine with this size block. Furrowing through. Okay, nice and dry mud. Another little trick you can do is that. Okay, see how I used a little bit of the softer mud on this block here? And what I did is I pushed hard into it to give it a good bite. So now when I push this one into it, and as I give that a little tap up, I've got a really good contact on both blocks, which will prevent cracking and give it a really good bond. Okay, you don't even hardly have to tap that. What we'll talk about now is the time to finish your mortar joint off. Okay, if you finish it too early, then you're definitely going to get shrinkage cracks as the water content dries out of your mortar. So what you've got to do is you've got to wait, and you can see the difference between this section here and this section here. You'll see here that it looks grainy, like when in the ocean and the waves come in and then it sucks back out and the sand sucks, and you can see it's getting really dry. That's what you want to have, is that sort of look there. See just here, still a little bit wet there, there's some moisture there. That's a little bit too early to do our finish on our blocks. So we'll give this a few minutes and then we'll come back to it. You can see just by, I've made a little tool up here, and it's quite okay to give your blocks, you know, say you're waiting for them to set off. You can give it a little touch up, and knowing that you can come back over it, which is what I'm doing here, just to give it a little bit of a finish. So notice as I'm doing that there now, how the mud comes out quite dry. That's really nice when you're pointing up. If your mud's, when it comes out, falls out nice and dry. This one up here, if you look at that, if I pull this one out using a raker, see how that comes out and it's still wet? Yeah, so that's still wet, and if I was raking this with that consistency, it's too wet. I won't get a good finish. That needs to dry more. But down the bottom here, what we laid first before we went and had a little chat, is quite dry. And you can see the difference in that. It's nearly sandy. It's not holding together anymore. This one here is quite okay. This is our second course. You can rake that out, and so you might have seen a tool like this. It's a French tool or a tuck pointer. It's a valuable tool when laying with the wood stone to compress a joint. So if you have a raker or if you've got a raked joint, you might rake your joint out, and with this I can even do it with this, and I can get a little bit of a cut joint there. Now you see the advantage of this tool over a raker. See how it really irons out and compresses the joint? That's the advantage of using a tool like this. So I can cut in a little bit of a motion just to cut backwards and forwards, and flick the mud out. It really flicks it away from where the work, and I run it through, and I'm getting a really good compression. You can see how neat that looks. So I can use the butt of it sometimes just to run up and do any little compression that I need, or the tip just to come in and cut a section out that's in. To save time, you might use a quick raker, like a raking tool that's got wheels, and you rake it out, and then you just run over the rake joint with this little tool to give yourself a nice joint that's sealed up. We did a round iron joint here earlier, and you can see here what's really important is that it's not separating. As mortar dries, it shrinks away from the block, and you get like a shrinkage crack. You can see here that it hasn't done that, and that's what's really important, is to have that kind of finish that's nice and tight. The advantage of doing like a rake joint is you can leave the joint for a lot longer than if you're doing an iron joint. So we ironed this side, and it's not wet still. That's the ideal time for finishing your joint up. And like I said, it's sort of not going to, not that nice and dry. Probably most of the time, you'll brush it before you run over it with your pointer. Okay, so you're brushing it, getting rid of anything off the surface. So the last thing that you did was that, touching it up with your pointer. I always come in and I'll use a stiff bristle brush or a wire brush, and I'll just go over the work and touch up any little areas that have mortar smears or mortar stains hanging out on the blocks. It's important to leave that to the next morning to try and do any major cleanup, otherwise you just smear it and you make your work really dirty. So just bear in mind that in the morning while your mud's mixing, come and do a little touch up of your work with your bristle brush, and your work won't need cleaning. If it does, make your mud a little bit drier.